Welcome to the George Lynch Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Legendary Gear. The game call company is Legend by Design. Well, folks, we're here doing a late season goose podcast. It's down here in January. It's cold. It's bitter cold. It's gone from warm to cold. But this has been one of the toughest waterfowl seasons. I've mentioned this in the past of some of the past podcasts, but the drought this year has definitely taken a toll. I knew it would here in the fall. We lost a lot of the loafing ponds and ponds that the ducks and geese held up in the midday. When the water is open and lake is open, that means it has open access to not just the waterfowl, but also to hunting pressure. So when we get the hunting pressure on the lakes, when we had all the loafing ponds, a lot of those birds in midday, they'd roost there, but they take off midday and hold up on these loafing ponds, and they'd hold there in these loafing ponds, especially the ones that had cornfields around it. They were just prime for locations to, especially if you weren't too close to the loafing pond. If you had them, you get too close to it, of course, we bumped them off the loafing pond. But, if you get away from there for a good mile or so away from the loafing pond, it produced pretty good hunting. And this year, though, being so sporadic that we had just a few of the loafing ponds, everything else was dried up. I would say probably 80% was dried up here. Maybe 20% was open. The birds that get the pressure on the lake, what happens if they don't have those loafing ponds and the pressure's out there, they'll just move on. They'll move on to an area where they either hold water, an area that has a larger refuge, it doesn't have to be very far from here. It could be back up. We're living in south central Iowa. It's about an hour and 40 minutes drive to Des Moines as the bird flies. Who knows? It might be an hour, it might be 45 minutes. But which is, hop, skip up there for a bird. And they have a lot of open river systems, and they always hold a lot of birds. So, they can bounce back and forth here. We get the weather warm up, and where the heck these birds come from. I believe that they come 2 hours away, and they're back here. When it freezes up back here, they bounce back up to the Des Moines area there and hit that open river systems. And there's enough cornfields and stuff that they'll get banged a little bit, but they'll end up staying in an area that they find. Once they've been there long enough, they'll find the safe refuge of those that have lived and survived. So that's kind of the life and ways of the waterfowl. But here, like I said, we had the drought. We didn't have the loafing ponds. We didn't have. We went through. Man, it was so tough. We were into Christmas area there, I think. Christmas, we had to bring our horses down. It was that frigid, dangerous cold. It was minus 26, minus 28. You know how it's on that Iowa. And luckily, we kind of sit here with hilly area and down in the bottom and kind of protected. But some of these open-winded hill areas around here, it is some of the coldest wind that I've ever faced in anywhere in the country. And they definitely get some cold open winds. It makes it tough on the wildlife. It makes it tough on the deer and turkey and whatever. But there at Christmas time, I think we had wind chill factors at minus 26, minus 28. Birds gone. Everything's froze up, gone. See ya, sayonara, heading to Florida, heading south. But it didn't take long. I think it was a week later that we were driving around, and we noticed that the temperature, we went up to 66 degrees. Folks, that's a 90-degree switch from in a week's time. And, of course, it didn't take long, 2 or 3 days of that. Bam, birds were back. Everything turned to a greasy mud. But it was good hunting for the first couple days. I knew that we had new birds. And here's a couple tips of always finding the new birds in your area. Number one, when you start hearing geese flying, after dark, and I'm not talking the first half hour after dark, I'm talking 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, you're hearing birds flying above. And we hear that probably more so than a lot because, we live right off the waterfowl refuge here. So the birds that are coming in, I know that when I got birds coming in, I hear them flying into the water at 9, 10, 11 o'clock. We got new birds that just arriving in the area. Best time to get out next day and start getting out there because these birds haven't come accustomed. They haven't come to partial to any field. They're out there looking. It's so funny because you can see them out there, and I can tell just how their flying pattern. They're not from A to B. They're just out there floating and looking. And those are the prime times when you see geese like that. It's up, you have a great opportunity with that to hunt those traffic geese, to pull them in your areas. And that's what you want to look for in those flights. When you start seeing birds in big numbers, and they're just, you hear the old saying, they're on a mission. I mean, they might be high, they might be some low. I think it depends on those who migrate more, but those birds are who get up and they're just pumping wings from point A to point B, and then they do about 10 circles before they go down. And those are tough, killable birds. Those are birds that are really tough, paranoid. So what I found in the late season, I'm going to get into this, is that my decoy spread is set up a little different, and the calling, I'm going to say the calling has got to be very well structured. You have to dot I's, cross T's, and even so, I'll say what I found more here in the South. In the late season, I used to love late season because I hunted snow so much in the North Midwest. Where you're talking Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Minnesota. You're in this late season, you're definitely getting in the snow. And man, I love hunting birds in the snow, and you can disappear. And also, your decoys stick out so much. And what's been tough down here in the southern part, is that we very rarely get any snow. And we'll get a little bit of snow cover, and that could be good. And then it's gone maybe in 4 days. When this year it's been real tough because we're running here in the second week of January and we still have no snow cover. So it makes it tough for one thing. So in our areas, and these geese that are, if you're trying to hunt traffic and you're not in that area, you got to have eyesight, you got to be seen. So it's really a blessing. And we try to get with some of our farmers here that if you can get a farmer to work with you, and especially in a field that you're sitting here and you don't have much snow for sticking out, you got the picked corn. The corn stalks sit pretty high. If you're looking at corn stalks that sit from 12 to 16 inches, it's pretty tough, and it's pretty tough on the birds. And what we found, that a lot of the birds down here, the farmers who chisel plow, the farmers who mow their cornfields, they kind of mow it down. That seems to be the field of choice for a lot of birds. A couple of reasons, especially when ducks are very careful and paranoid about, when they're flying into these high cornstalk fields, they're taking a chance of damaging, breaking wings, breaking any type of bone. They're very cautious to flying into predators hiding within the corn. It's a great place to hunt coyote and bobcat, stuff like that. If you're doing predator hunting, I like the higher pick cornfields because the predators like to use that, and they use it as covers. They're coming into the squealing rabbit. But anytime you have the more open, everything's more cautious coming, except for ducks or geese. And so when you get a cornfield, we have one of my favorite cornfields we got. The farmer's mowed half of it, and the other half he's left standing picked corn. Now, not standing corn, but the cornfield's picked. And so, like I said, the stalks are anywhere from probably 12 to 16 inches. So how I utilize that, and what I kind of tend to, and I'm not like saying one rule over everything, but I like to I use full bodies probably more and more in this late season, especially, and I call my front presentation, the presentation hole, that when those birds are coming in, that's giving the best look. It's presenting. I want the best decoys presenting the most realistic. And the three-dimensional decoy is really hard to beat on pressured, tough geese that are trying to come in, who might circle several times. Especially like in the snow and then this cut corn, it sticks out a lot better from a distance. You can see the full bodies, and whether to me the color really doesn't matter as much as that full body given fullness there, that three-dimensional. I'm using silhouettes a lot this year in this late season because we don't have the snow, but I've been using silhouettes, and I'll put them in the upwind of me. I put them in the upwind of me, kind of making an arrowhead, but I kind of make the standing corn stalks. I put the silhouettes in there, and basically from the side of it when they're flying, trying to give that black look, because they just need to see that blackness, and it just gives a fullness of, a bunch of birds as a refuge, type of refuge look of a bunch of birds out in this field, that this is the hot spot. And I like doing that, but pretty much out in front of me. And, in this type of situation with laying the layout blinds in the standing corn and the higher corn, we're hunting with the wind at our back. So I'm kind of setting up, if you will, can picture this kind of in a U in front of me. But as the decoys come out in front of me, about 20 yards, I'll have them kind of spread out and angling out. And once I get about 30 to 40 yards, I'll angle and taper them in out to where my last will be about 50 yards. Now there's a couple things that works really good that you can do here. When you do that, you kind of taper out and then taper back in. And I use 30 yards, and so because that kind of sets anything inside here is definitely in what I like is in my killable range, or our fun range, or the range we want to shoot to do the most damage. As I'll start tapering, I make a slow taper them back out, and at the very end I would probably put my very end is about 50 yards. So I know basically, and it opens it up and kind of sets a pattern, a runway for those geese to make a natural flight to want to come into that pocket. It's kind of you open it up, you're opening the door, they shoot the hole, and then here's the pocket. So I'll set the decoys about, my furthest one out about 50 yards when we're angling back out. Now what the cool thing about that is that I like to use a lot of full bodies out in front there, but I'll put a lot of the feeders to my right, to my left. I try to put feeders behind us. I'll onto the sides. We'll have feeders on my furthest wings out is where I'll put my sentries and more of the active decoys, walking decoys, maybe a few resters, but pretty much the feeders are all up front. I'm trying to get birds that are moving up into the feeding hole. Now, a great thing that is great in this late season, I think, is probably what is the final denominator. It puts the icing on the cake, so to speak. That old cliche is that to my right and to my left, straight over just into the mowed corn, I like to put sleepers. And it's good to have 2, 3, 4 dozen even. But even at the least amount, I like 2 dozen sleepers on my right, 2 dozen sleepers on my left, which is straight out where there's another pocket, kind of to my right, another pocket to my left, between them and the feeders. And because a lot of times geese, when they are feeding, especially if you look in the late season, because they're conserving energy, they're building up the food source, and filling the hunger, sitting there and letting the digestion take and gain in strength, then to fight the cold and flying back to the roost. A lot of times these birds aren't going to feed, especially in the bitter cold, and fly straight back, and that especially if they're going to do a good hard feed. Sometimes those geese will go out and feed late full moon. They'll lay out in those fields and get in the sleeper. But the best thing they do is they'll sit there and the reason I put them ahead of the feeders, because your geese will feed, and once they're done feeding, they'll walk over, turn into the wind, shake their butt, and then sit down and tuck their head under their wing. And that way, as danger ever comes, they just stand up and they're right facing into the wind to take off. They don't have to turn and get disoriented or whatever and try to see they're gone, turn into the wind. So it looks really natural. It's a contentment thing. It shows that these geese, that there's safety here. There's 2 things. There's food and there's safety. So those are the 2 things that I'm trying to present here in this late season. So when we get the spread set, and I'm telling you that why I like using the full bodies, and I will mix the silhouettes in it, and it gains the bigger spread. Flagging is to me the crucial. I would probably leave my goose call home before I left the flag home. To me, especially when the geese are it's very critical now. They've been hammered, they've been hunted hard. These are geese that, like I said, they've been shot at from Canada, from Dakotas, from Minnesota, on down to southern Iowa. So they probably, you probably got geese that could have been shot at many times in many situations of going into a field and been shot at. So they start learning, they start picking out little things that I think that become muscle memory, that they see that is out of place and sounds out of place and looks out of place. So remembering that, so if we set up as natural as we can and we fool that, we don't want to blow all our efforts of getting everything looking right to not sounding right. So we want to, I'm going to let the bird dictate how we're going to approach this with a call. And to be able to do that, you've got to read that bird. And to me, the flag is the number one tool for gaining and looking. When we see geese out there in the distance, the first thing I'm always doing is flagging. Now, I understand if they don't respond to the flag, of course we're going to get the calls, we're going to scream, we're going to do everything, because I just can't let birds go without trying something. But a lot of times, and this is the watch, if you start flagging at birds and you see immediate response, this is what I'm going to tell you that really concentrate of not calling at all. And so when those birds are turning, that means that I've gained attention. Very quick. I've got their attention. We have high interest here, because it didn't take them a time. It didn't take me a bunch of flagging to gain their interest. And let's go see this. As they turn. So now, as they're turning, we're going to flag. But once they start that lining up, and they're coming in, they get around 70, 80 yards to 60 yards. I always like, especially if I'm hunting in a layout blind, I like to set a sentry out, and I have the sentry facing towards them. So he's facing the downwind, and instead of facing in the wind, upwind, he's facing downwind. And so what is cool about that, he's looking at that, and as he's looking upwind, he's looking downwind, he's looking at the geese. So I always set my flag just above his back so I can put my arm out of the calling hole of the layout blind. But if those birds are 60 and 70 yards, I'm still not calling. They hit 100 yards, they hit 80 yards. I'm hitting that flag and shaking that flag just above his back. And that's giving the resemblance of a bird he's flapping his wings, he's feeling his oats. And so, excuse me, he's looking there downwind. It sounds, he's looking down there, and he's looking and watching that coming in, hitting that flap. That keeps our eyes on the birds. Now, if those birds are coming in and they see that little bit of motion, and at that time, if it gets near that time and those birds start to want to wander off, now's the time that the timing of using the call. So there's a couple things, and in a late season, this will work on if you use one of our old man, a longer call, a medium-sized call. It's pretty much, you can do the same thing. For me, I like running a short call more in the late season a lot because of the change in quickness, but I can get aggressive to deep my tune it so I can get it deep. I can get some good spit moans out of it. But there's a couple sequences that I like to do in that late season, working a bird and watching them. So number one is, to me, I'm going to run a call now. When he starts to move, I want to get a reaction. And I'm not going to overdo it because I don't want to push him out. If there's something that is kind of, he's just slowly moving out. He's not flared. He's just starting to drift. So when they're drifting on you, usually my go-to is a spit note. And I'm going to work with it because there's so many guys that when we talk about calling, one of the number one things guys come up, hey man, I can't get a spit note. Well, can you do a cluck first and a cluck and a moan? And if they are, then sometimes it's, the spit moan's been a spit note. It's been one of those notes that so many people struggle with. And then when they get it, they're like, whoa, this is so easy. I didn't know. Yeah, you got to open the mind and just run this basic and let the call run. So what I like to do, and I'm going to give you an example in a spit note, and I'm using our new ripper, little short ripper call because it's very aggressive and it has our game changer gut, so I can still get the trick notes and deep notes out of this thing and be aggressive. But you want to put your tip of your tongue behind your bottom teeth. My bottom lip is riding underneath the lower part of the mouthpiece. My top lip is pushing against the top rim of the mouthpiece. And what I do is I'll put more pressure on that top lip and just kind of let the bottom lip float, because you're going to use that bottom lip to help as leverage and pushing some of these notes. The top lip is sealing that so you don't blow it out of the front of the call. So what I want to do is there's a kind of couple things. It's real simple. Is you're almost locking that call to get that right spit. You're going to add a little voice inflection, but I don't want to get you so concentrated on the voice inflection first and not concentrating on the air presentation. This is a two-part note. And the call, I'm trying to get the, which is going to be, Now once I get that, and I'm using, in the front of my tongue and my lips to push that note into the call. So that's why it's a spit, because you're almost spitting without the moisture into that call. But here's the secret behind that note, is behind it. So I've always talked about your push point, and that is at the base of the Adam's apple. So when you suck your air in and stop, your air stops at the bottom of your throat, right at the base of the Adam's apple. That is what I call the push point. That's where you're going to push that air for the second note. So it's going to go from the front, and I'm using my Adam's apple to, so that's how I'm getting that. So it's, now once you practice that, you hear the two different notes. Then I'm going to start slowly trying to put them together. Again, using the Adam's apple to pushing that. Once you get the 10 notes going, then you're going to start speeding that up, and it's going to sound like this. And you keep working that and practicing that till it's, like I said, once you get that in the throat, the timing of the spit to the throat, that timing, it's going to become second nature to you. So this is that time, once we kind of showed you hitting that spit note, is that I'm going to watch those geese in here. I'm going to give them a couple quick. I'm going to watch them. If they give me a little reaction like, hey, I kind of like that, I kind of keep working them back and forth like that. Now, the next thing, once they start showing interest in that, if they're really coming, again, shut up. You don't have to do this sequence. This has to be every time. So if those geese look, hey, I hit that, oh, I'm good, and you start seeing that little kind of moving back and forth that they're getting ready to set and want to come down. So what I'm going to do is, watch that and let them finish. Now, if they're still a little nervous and still not, then I like to do what I call a little ground murmur. And this is a very critical, a very, I'd say, successful. And once you get this down, it really works on finishing tough geese. It's a great thing to throw in early season, too, and if you just want to finish geese. But if you ever have geese on the ground, once they lit, and they are still exciting, the excitement of more birds coming, the ones on the ground will kind of hit that. They hit what I call a little murmur cluck, and it's a buzz murmur, I would call it. And it's very easy to do. And if you can remember back in the beginning of learning to run a call on the air presentation, I was trying to get you to do kind of the U sound and and then you're doing the well, we're kind of doing that same thing. I kind of like taking my two fingers on my offhand. My call hand sits there. I'm kind of opening the call a little bit, using a couple fingers just over the edge of with my offhand. back of the call. Now you listen to that, you heard that. Now you take that. That is teaching you how I'm teaching you the air presentation, but air control has to be felt. You have to be able to apply it. It's just like lifting weights. You can't lift 300 pounds if you've only put 50 pounds on the bench. So you got to know what that 300 pounds feels like and work up to it to control it. Same way with the air control. You got to know that feeling of, okay, this is how I apply it. Now, I might add too much at one time, and but so that's where the perfect practice comes in, because so you're getting that same. So work on that and practice that little sequence, and when you start practicing and doing it slow, you start speeding it up then. Now, that's a little ground murmur. Then what I like to add sometimes, and like again, this is all realism. This is what Geese does, and you're putting it there trying to sound like 2 or 3, but I'm basically getting that buzz cluck, that buzz moan. And another thing that I like to throw into is I call my finesse is a little spit moan. This is a great thing to finish up, and especially if you got a couple geese working, or those pairs, or you get a single, I'll hit that little ground murmur. So that's what I call a bit of spit moan, and then you can add a spit moan. Then if you want to just really put the icing on the cake, and you want to get them to just to cream over their toes and lay the feet right down in front of you, we can add that spit moan into a hiccup, which we're going to speed that up, and then you'll hear that. So that is a good, usually that's my ending and finishing. Birds are coming in, and I'm really putting the icing on there. And especially, if you got 2 or 3 and you hit that and they start to coming in, they hit that 30 yards, you don't have to go. But there's a lot of times that you'll have maybe a pair of geese or that one coming in, and you got 30 behind him. It's another 50 yards. So it's imperative a lot of times that we finish that front one, that he is just running in and then running up into the apex of our spread. And what he's doing is he's pulling the rest of those, the ones that we're actually shooting. We're using him for the decoy. So that's a lot of times. That's why I go through the whole sequence, even though you got a couple left. Some guys might shoot those 2 birds with 50, a bunch of birds out there at 50 yards. They might shoot those 2 and figure 2 in the hand's better than educating 50 in the bush. But I'm a little different. If we're going to educate them, let's try to get our, 3 shot what we can, or the best opportunity of watching. I just love to watch birds work too. So anyways, I'll kind of give you a little sequence of out in the field, spotting geese, giving them a couple spit notes, and I'm going to work them on from there. there you go. Hopefully you just got your 3 shots off and 3 birds laying toenails up, tipping toenails. But anyway, I hope that this helps you guys out. It's been a tough year. You're always learning, but due to as many cards and many aces you can put in the stack of the deck, it's just to help try to better your opportunities. And it's tough enough out there. Everything's new and things are changing and birds are evolving, and we have to try to evolve with them. And that's what I feel like right now. I'm in an evolving state. I've learned, for 40 years of things that I've done. Sometimes the basics are all coming back, but sometimes some new approaches have to be taken and learned, and trying different things. But I will say this: you can never beat realism, and you can never beat the timing and trying to look real, sound real, and putting it all together, and then learning from that, And anyway, but I also want to reach out to you, my podcast guys, and just wanted to tell you that, hey, if you're listening, please, if you like to subscribe, but also, hey, I'm putting together, because we're getting more in this off season. Turkey season is coming, and we will be excited with that. But, we're going to work through this off time, and also with the summer coming up, but we're going to put on calling clinics, and I want to do something once a week, maybe twice a week if we get enough people. Maybe and right now it's in a beginning stage. We're trying to put it together in a Zoom where we could try to get several guys a night onto this deal. But it's all that I'm wanting to help guys to get a better caller. Trying to help people to get better in the field. I put a lot of time in designing these products. Working on things to get them to sound as realistic as possible. They still, just like any guitar, or any instrument, it takes practice. There's nothing that you just pick up and sound like Ted Nugent from the beginning. Ted Nugent took years and years of practice to get where he's at, and he also is using, great equipment to do it now. So I want to be able to help you guys. If you have any ideas and stuff like that, email me, reach out. Our YouTube also is Legendary Gear with George Lynch. We're going to do some stuff on that, with instructional. But, as we start looking at these podcasts, when we're looking at the amount of subscribers and people are looking, a lot of the guys are liking our instructional videos of what we're doing. And I'm getting a ton of emails and people calling me and saying, man, your instructions are helping me. And I'm learning this, trying to put this together. I've got years in my head of doing things, and there's some things that I might overlook that might help, that I forgot about because you're doing it for so long. But I'd like to reach out, and if you guys think that's a great idea, doing a Zoom type of thing once a week, and you're interested in wanting to get better and you're calling, then let's put this together. Reach out to us and see if we can get this going. And we're not just going to do just on Canada calls. This is going to be working. Definitely going to be doing stuff with cut downs. I've had a lot of guys who love our sound files and love the podcast that we do with Todd Copley and things, talk about cut downs. Then they get a cut down and find out, wow, I'm having a hard time running this, and then we tell you it's a totally different beast. So we're going to do stuff on cut downs, duck calls. We're also going to do on spec calls, snow calls. So we're going to cover a wide variety of this stuff, and even turkey calls. I'm watching geese flying over now. I should be out in the field, but anyway, I just thought I'd put it out there, and I appreciate all of you guys. And like I said, if you like it, please subscribe, pass it on, and let's get the heritage spread and pass it on to the young ones. And always remember, hunt safe, hunt smart, and may the good Lord be your guide.
Well, I'll be out there, rain is shining, all a part of the great design. Bring it on, I can never get enough, because that's what legends are made of.